Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Well, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, USA Today's NFL Wire State cover, of course, your Arizona Cardinals. And joining me on episode 750, our 750th episode of the show, is my co-host Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site, as we get to talk more about the Arizona Cardinals coaching staff as it is beginning to take shape. We talked about earlier in the week, our takeaways from Mike LaFleur's introductory press conference. There's not much to go in there. And a little bit about the defensive coordinator position, which hasn't been filled yet. A few names have come up, but we kind of talked about a few of those already. They did, although it has not been announced, they have chosen an offensive coordinator, and while it sort of makes sense, it is one of the most underwhelming additions you could make. And I saw a TikTok about it with the Giants, Jets, and the Cardinals all making decisions on their offensive coordinators who are considered to be pretty not great. Nathaniel Hackett, the famously failed head coach of the Denver Broncos, who didn't even make it through one season, spent some time with Green Bay. He replaced Mike LaFleur as offensive coordinator with the Jets under Robert Saleh. He now joins Mike LaFleur as his offensive coordinator, although it is a different look. This is an offensive coordinator position that's more like Byron Leftwich or Harold Goodwin, because Mike LaFleur is going to be running his offense and calling plays. And so having Hackett, a guy who's been an offensive coordinator at a number of stops, he's been a head coach, in terms of checking boxes of the things you want, it's a move that sort of makes sense, especially since he knows LaFleur, having worked with his older brother, Matt LaFleur, and has experience in all that. But I mean, when you have to laugh, right, when you hear Nathaniel Hackett's going to be the offensive coordinator, considering so much was blamed on Nathaniel Hackett for the Broncos and then with the Jets over the last couple of seasons. It's really interesting to see how that goes, and then how Hackett, Matt Nagy, and Frank Reich are all have jobs right now.
Yeah, and the entirety of the Hackett situation is a couple things. One, I think it was Connor J. Rogers. If I'm wrong, I apologize off the rip. The LaFleurs and Hackett are like really close. Like allegedly, they vacation and travel together. So this is like one of those situations to me, and I'd always love to get your take on it. To me, where a guy in Mike LaFleur knows what he's asking for from the OC. He knows that Hackett has done this job before for his brother, and that he's comfortable in the idea of him being a sounding board, maybe kind of a mentor, and a guy he can lean on as he's growing into the position, as opposed to just being the offensive play caller, which is what Mike LaFleur will be on top of being the head coach, right? So he'll help with game planning, he'll help with tendencies, he'll help with spotting during the games. I'm assuming he'll just be up in the booth. All of that makes a difference for a head coach who's on the field calling plays in that situation. But at the same time, let's be honest, it's one of those moves that
Cardinals move that they could have made, right?
Right. A guy that is insanely not well respected in the league amongst fans and media. And generally, I don't give two what's about that. Right. Like I don't care what fans or media think too much of a guy. However, it is interesting that a guy that is basically looked at as terrible is somebody that Cardinals fans have to go in and defend. And it's just such a Cardinals thing, especially when you look at the fact that for the most part, you had the reality of everybody goes, all right, they didn't do a great job of their cycle to end up with Mike LaFleur, but they got a really solid, respected, young, up and coming offensive mind as head coach. Like all of that, and then everybody saw the Nate Hackett thing, and even though they knew or they know that he's not calling plays, the consensus is, well, there goes all of that, right? Like
it's the Cardinals. As much as Michael Bidwill seems to be all about the optics, they have paid no attention to optics. They've completely ignored how things look. And honestly, you remember when we were talking about Gus Bradley going to the Titans to work with Robert Saleh. This is like Hackett. This is essentially a younger Gus Bradley type move where Hackett's working with someone he's very comfortable with, that he respects immensely. Mike LaFleur respects Nathaniel Hackett immensely, but he doesn't have to do the offensive coordinator-y thing. It's not going to fall on Nathaniel Hackett anything that happens with this offense, much like when Bruce Arians was here and it was Harold Goodwin or it was Byron Leftwich. Those guys were offensive coordinators by name only, and my guess is Hackett will be that. He'll be offensive coordinator, but really kind of assistant head coach offense in a way.
Well, and again, he's done that in Green Bay, and I posted it on X yesterday, right? Like the reality. I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to justify it. The optics are terrible. It is what it is. But in this role, if it's the same role that he was in Green Bay, in 2019, they were 18th in yards, 15th in points. In 2020, now again, they had Aaron Rodgers, which is a trump card of all trump cards of what the Cardinals do not have. But in 2020, they were 5th in yards, 1st in points. And then 2021, they were 10th in yards, 10th in points. So a top 15 offense every season, 2 top 10 offenses, 1 top 5 offense in his 3 years in the same role. Again, in this role, if that is what his role truly is, you have to be okay with it. You don't have to be excited. You don't need to do all the other stuff. Like I saw people being like, well, it's a veteran presence and a guy that's called plays at a successful rate and been a head coach. I'm like, whoa, we should probably not talk about the head coaching thing, because that was one of the most spectacular fails we have ever seen in NFL history. And we've seen bad head coaches, but this is like Urban Meyer level bad. I mean, this guy didn't even make it a full season in the NFL before he got fired and replaced. Like, this is not something you want to say like, hey, he's been a head coach in the NFL. Well, no, it was terrible. But if you want to say like, hey, he had a nice little run with Green Bay. Right before that, he had a solid couple seasons with Jacksonville, getting the most out of Blake Bortles at the time. Like, those are the positives of this hire. And that's what we need to focus on right now. And if and when it implodes, you can look back and say, little things like that were kind of the writing on the wall, right? Like,
and this move as well, what it does is, when we were talking about Wink Martindale the other day, this addition, Nathaniel Hackett, what this does is give LaFleur his veteran mentor guy without having to go out and get the veteran defensive coordinator. And that is now evident by the guys that they've been going out and interviewing. Now, whether Nick Rawlis is in the mix, Charlie Bullen, former outside linebackers coach here, was the interim defensive coordinator for the Giants last year to end the year. Dino Vasso, we talked about him. Aubrey Pleasant of the Rams. Like, these are now up and coming guys, and you don't feel like now with the addition of Hackett onto the staff as one of the coordinators, you don't necessarily have to have a veteran defensive coordinator. You can have someone now. Ideally, there will be some veteran present with the defense, unlike how the Cardinals did at all under Nick Rawlis. But but you don't have to peg them with going with a Wink or some Gus Bradley, who they tried to get.
Do you think? I'd love your opinion on this. Do you? And we'll never know the answer, obviously. So it's just two guys speculating and shooting the crap. But like, do you think if they would have got Bradley, that they still would have got Hackett? Like, do you think it was one or the other, or do you think, because it is interesting that it like happened kind of after they failed at getting Bradley, right? Like, it wasn't like same day they were like, oh yeah, here we didn't get Gus Bradley, but here's Nathaniel Hackett. It was like the next day. It was like, okay, this is our backup, like you're saying, like veteran coaching presence, so we can go get a young first-time play caller on the defensive side.
I don't know if it'd be, because it would feel, because the Hackett thing, it feels like a natural fit, right? Because of his work with, like, Mike and Matt LaFleur, very close. I'm going to gather that probably over the next several months, between coaches and player additions, we're going to see a lot of connections to the Rams, to the Jets, and to the Packers. I'm guessing just how that sort of thing goes, because the Hackett, honestly, aside from how it looks, the Hackett edition makes perfect sense when you look at it from a LaFleur point of view.
Well, again, it's a very much a comfort thing. And,
yes.
And for a first-time head coach, I don't actually hate that, right?
No,
like,
not at all.
Like, get a guy that you're comfortable with, that is not, like, let's be honest. We talked about it with the Gus Bradley thing the other day. Like, there are guys out there, and Nathaniel Hackett's one of them, that there's no ambition in this. Like, it's not going to lead to him being the hot commodity again. So it's okay if he's just around for the next, let's hope, 5-6+ years, right? Like, I know that's probably unrealistic just in the history of the Cardinals, but like, it's not a bad thing if that's what happens. I mean, he's a 46-year-old guy. Maybe 4 or 5 years as an OC with the Cardinals, and then it's like, okay, I got the itch back. Like, I'm back in the positive graces of the NFL teams and things like that. Like, they're looking at me that I'm not a joke anymore. Because here's the reality, man. I mean, like, those 3 Green Bay teams, they weren't his. We know that. They were Matt LaFleur's. That Jacksonville team, that was his. They were 5th in points, 6th in yards. And then outside of that, man, he's got one offense in the top 20 in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and 7 if you include his head coaching. Like, one top 20 offense in yards or points. Like, they're usually, I mean, you look at it, Buffalo 2013, 19th in yards, 22nd in points. Denver, his brief head coaching, 21st in yards, 32nd in points. Jacksonville 2016, 23rd and 25th. The Jets, after he replaced LaFleur, he was 31st and 29th. Then the next year he was 24th and 24th. Like, it's not something to hang your hat on. So again, it might be one of those situations of like, Mike's like, hey, I trust you. You worked with Matt. You did this exact thing for Matt, and it worked out great. Like, it was wonderful. And then it got you kind of some good looks. And now you look at it and you go, okay, maybe it doesn't get you any looks. Maybe that time has passed, right? But maybe it allows you to, get a third chance, or really like another opportunity to call plays on your own again. Cause you're, in 4 years, you're only 50. Like, you'll be able to go out and maybe find a team that gives you a shot. Cause yeah, it's been bad since he left Green Bay, and there's no other way to put it. So it has to be a comfort level for LaFleur. It has to be a comfort level for Monty and the management group to be like, because the optics, like you said, the optics are just not great.
And with that, coming up next on the Rise of Sierra podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's talk about quarterbacks that, if we want more optics, we can give you more fun optics. That's coming up next on Rise Up Sea Red. We're back on the Rise of Sea Red podcast, best of Cardinals talk on the web. We haven't really talked about the roster yet this offseason, but with the addition of Nathaniel Hackett, and with the Cardinal situation at quarterback, where Kyler Murray, they're non-committal on Kyler Murray right now, which makes sense because the organization seems to be ready to move on, and he's probably ready to move on from the Cardinals with the way things have gone. Jacoby Brissett, who knows if, and I even saw this, and I know this wasn't a report, but a guy I've known for many years when he was on the NFL Wire with me, Connor Hughes, connected to the Jets, suggested that Jacoby Brissett might be a trade target for the Jets, as they just added Frank Reich. I know Brissett was he was definitely Monty's guy. He was definitely Monty's guy / Petzing's guy because of the connection that they've had in between Cleveland and New England. But we could see a completely different quarter. I would believe we could have a completely different quarterback room this year. But there are 3 free agent quarterbacks with connections to this coaching staff that, honestly, probably all 3 are an upgrade from the Brissett stuff. And the first name, it's immediately, and who do you think of when you think of Nathaniel Hackett, Seth? It's Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is a free agent. His guy, Nathaniel Hackett, who was in Green Bay and with the Jets, is now in Arizona. And could you imagine the Aaron Rodgers show on the Cardinals? Because if that happens, one, Aaron Rodgers is still a very good quarterback. He is not what he was in Green Bay, but he's miles ahead of what we've been seeing. But oh my gosh, could you imagine? Could you imagine how much fun, quote unquote, fun having Aaron Rodgers on this roster would be for this media, for the national view of the Cardinals? That this would be. I'll have all the popcorn. You can come over, Seth, and we can just create content after content after content with Aaron Rodgers here.
Yeah, it would just become a circus, and it would be one of those things that it would be one of those things that what you're getting, right? You're going to be a team that is good enough to compete, not quite good enough to.
Wouldn't it be the perfect quarterback for this year to sort of get the Cardinals anywhere near the rest of the NFC West?
Well, and that's just what it comes down to is like, what are your goals? And you and I have talked about this. Is the reality is if you run it back with the Jacoby Brissett, you're basically saying like, hey, it's okay if we win 2 or 3 games. Like we don't care about that. We're setting ourselves up. And by the way, going back to the last segment, but the most positive spin out of the hiring of Nathaniel Hackett is, wow, the Cardinals are really going all in on Arch Manning, right? So like that's kind of the thought process. So if you do that with Aaron, now there is father time, right? And undefeated, all the little things that we can joke about, but like you're probably looking at a 7 to 10 win team, right? Like he's not going to come here to be bad. Obviously, I know the Jets were bad, but like that's not who Rodgers is, and that's obviously LaFleur cannot afford to get a guy like Aaron Rodgers and then be really bad, right? Like that just can't happen. So you look at it. I think that would be a fun way to be like, hey, we are still serious about winning. We are still serious about competing and being competitive within, the most competitive division or, in the NFL. So I'm okay with that, but also
it would be the most unserious way to be serious, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, 100%.
But Aaron Rodgers, like talk more about this when we build about roster. But there's 2 other quarterbacks as well that would make interesting additions, and either as a starter or a backup situation. Let's go to the next guy, which would be LA Rams backup quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo, who has been there for the last 2 years with the Rams as Matthew Stafford's backup, with Mike LaFleur there as the offensive coordinator. Garoppolo now 34 years old. At one time, a pretty solid starter. Was the only starter prior to Brock Purdy that Mike Shanahan, or rather Kyle Shanahan, could win games with. And never great. Took the 49ers to the Super Bowl, but it was woefully clear that he's not that guy. But and injuries have been kind of his thing. Any time that he's had, like over the last several years, he hasn't started more than 6 games since 2022. Could you see Garoppolo? Now, what I couldn't see, I would find it hard to believe that they would go a combo of Garoppolo Brissett like way back in the New England days when Brady started off the season suspended. But could you see a scenario where Garoppolo comes in either as the backup or maybe competing for the starting job in a punt year, maybe?
Yeah, and I mean that would be what it would be, right? Like we talk about being a little, serious, unserious in a way of competing. bringing on Jimmy Garoppolo would be a way of saying, like, we're competing, but we're not serious about competing, right? Like, and that's not a shot at Jimmy G. I mean, he's had a very nice career after being drafted in the second round. He's started 80 or 64 games in the NFL. He's got a nice record, but I mean, this is a guy that hasn't started consistently since 2022. You mentioned it. His time in Las Vegas, excuse me, he's 3-3, 7 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. He started one game last year for the Rams, went 0-1, 2 touchdowns to 1 interception. Didn't throw a pass this year for the Rams. It's a way of saying, like, hey, we're bringing in a competitive veteran that is comfortable in Mike LaFleur's system, and also saying, like, but going 3-14 again is not the worst thing in the world while we get ready for Arch or whoever they think is the best quarterback, right? People might say,
though, do you think that you would have Garoppolo and Brissett on the same roster?
I mean, here's the thing, and this is the hard part that a lot of people probably don't understand. Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be 35 this year, but Jacoby Brissett's going to be 34 this year. So there's like no difference in having them in here. I mean, the one difference is the statistical output of Jacoby is literally unquestioned, right? Like he's been a much better quarterback when he's played on the field than Jimmy the last couple of years. And yet somehow in the same time frame, going from 2022 to 2025, Brissett's 6 and 22 as a starter, where Jimmy is just simply, from 2022 to 2025, he's 10-7 as a starter. Like, it's weird to me that Brissett is just not a winning quarterback. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
it's just odd because you rarely see a guy that puts up the numbers that Brissett puts up. And I know this year was kind of an anomaly, but like he's had decent seasons, 18-6, 12-6, 23-8, obviously his best, but he's never produced a winning season ever as a quarterback. Like, he's just, unfortunately, and people could say, oh, he's on bad teams. It's like, do you think that 2022 the 2023 Las Vegas Raiders were a good team? No, the answer is no. They fired Josh McDaniels after 8 games, and yet somehow Jimmy G went 3-3. Like, it's just weird to say that, because you really do look at it and you're like, golly, this guy has just never been a part of a winning team. And so, like, I just don't see how you have a 34 to 30 league age 34 and a 35-year-old battling it out. Like, that just doesn't, like, if you bring in Jimmy G, I feel like your other option, and I know it's not like ever going to happen because of their history, but like a Zach Wilson type, right? Like, you have to bring in somebody that is young and you're hoping can potentially
has the little upside,
right? If you go with Jimmy G, if you leave it at Jacoby, you're doing the same thing, right? Like, you're saying, okay, we have Jacoby, let's go get, and again, it won't be Zach Wilson, but a Zach Wilson like player that can come in and compete for the job. And if Jacoby wins it, he wins it. It's just you probably don't want him to, because you've already seen that train wreck.
Yes, and the third quarterback to consider, some intrigue. I and that would be Malik Willis. Been the backup for the Packers the last couple of years. There is only a loose connection between Hackett and LaFleur, obviously. But there's also the connection with Monty Austinfort, because he was drafted by the Titans when Monty Austinfort was in the front office in Tennessee. He's been with the Packers the last 2 years. Hackett was on the Packers last year as a defensive consultant, as a defensive specialist, that was 100% after he got fired by the Jets, after the whole staff got fired by the Jets, that this was a case of Matt LaFleur saying, hey, Nate, come join me. We'll get you on the staff somehow. And this offensive guy became a defensive specialist. But he's been in the same building as Malik Willis. Obviously, Mike LaFleur's connection to his older brother, he would have a lot of insight as to what Malik Willis is as a quarterback, potentially as a starter. Although I having seen the Cardinals go the Kevin Cobb route and the Seahawks go with the Matt Flynn route, the number of times we've seen the young backup quarterback with a little bit of promise going elsewhere to start, and not real. I can't think of a time when that has particularly worked out for anyone. That said, Malik Willis would be a fun option for this year.
Yeah, he would be. It's interesting. He's looked at as being a guy that you're probably going to pay like, $11 million a year if you want him. Only 27. Everything I've read and listened to sounds like the reality is he's going to be a Miami Dolphin, right? But it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to bring him in and see what happens. I mean, there's some other names that we can throw out, whether or not they have any, interest or intrigue is to be seen. But you got a guy like Kenny Pickett, who's still only going to be 28 years old this year. The other one, a little tougher because he just tore his knee up, but I don't think he tore his ACL, right? Gardner Minshew. Those are guys that are under 30 that you can look at. The ones that are just over 30 like Mitchell Trubisky, right? Those are all names to think of. But yeah, I mean, realistically, the three names we mentioned are the three that really have their overall, they've been around either Hackett or LaFleur, and they would make sense.
Coming up next on the Rise of Sierra podcast, Best Cardinals Talk on the Web. We've got one last little thing to discuss, and that would be the Cardinals have a new running backs coach. That's coming up next on Rise of Sierra. We're back on the Rise of Sierra podcast, Best Cardinals Talk on the Web. Cardinals, the report came out that the Cardinals have made a running backs coach. Not a guy we really know about. It's a guy who's been in the NFL in coaching fellowships, and that would be Miami, University of Miami, the U running back coach. Britt is going to be the Cardinals running backs coach in 2026. That report coming in this afternoon on a Thursday, within an hour of us getting on to record this show. Interestingly enough, there's not a lot to know about him except, he's not even big enough to have a Wikipedia page yet. He did cross paths with Mike LaFleur in 2019 when Merritt had a cup of tea with the 49ers in 2019 under a coaching fellowship. It was probably an off season or a training camp type situation where he was with the 49ers. But that year, Mike LaFleur was on the offensive staff for the San Francisco 49ers at that time. I don't make a big deal about running backs coaches much because, the fact of the matter is when Autry Denson was hired 3 years ago by the Cardinals, I think he had been doing work in high school But when he got the call that he was working with high school, and then he'd done some college work, he'd played collegiately, and that move, like Denson did fine as a running backs coach, as we saw the Cardinals get some really good play from James Conner. You got the development of Amari Ricardo and things like that. What is your take on this kid, Matt Merritt, and the fact that he's been like dedicated running backs for a long time?
Yeah, I just posted on Revenge of the Birds, and Jess and I kind of had to go through his bio and extrapolate everything, because they go newest to oldest in the bio, and nobody wants that, right? Where'd you start? So grad assistant in a D3 program that he was actually a running back at back in 2010, man. I mean, so 16 years ago. And then from there, he's running back special teams coordinator at a prep academy, assistant running back coach at Ohio State for their national championship run. So worked with Ezekiel Elliott. Again, do we give him any credit for that? I would say no, right? Like, that's not a shot at him by any means, but like, do you really give him any credit for that? And then he did the slow burn up thing. From there, he went to a D2 Ohio Dominican, which I am not familiar with, if I'm being completely honest, in 2016. From there, he went to Elon in 2017, 2018. He was running backs coach and special teams coordinator at both those stops. And now somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Elon is a FCS, so like D1 AA. He was at James Madison in 2019. That coincides when James Madison was still in the FCS. They actually went to the national championship that year, lost to North Dakota State 28-20. And then he moved back up to D1. So, really a 5-year kind of wandering through D2, D1 AA to kind of cut his teeth, but it was all short-lived. So typically that means guys like him, other coaches like him, they like what he brings, because from there it's just been the rocket ship ride, right? So senior offensive analyst at Tennessee in 2021, running backs coach at Georgia Southern in 2022, running backs coach at the University of South Florida in 2023, and then, as Jess mentioned, the last 2 years at University of Miami. So like, this is a dude who grinded for 15 years, kind of toiled away the first decade, made it to James Madison, which is kind of the upper echelon of the lower level, and then got into D1 and just literally every year found an upgrade. I mean, I know people will say, well, Tennessee to Georgia Southern isn't an upgrade, but it's like going from offensive analyst where you're making $70,000 a year to running backs coach at Georgia Southern, probably making $180,000 to $200,000 a year. Huge upgrade, right? And then you get to the University of Miami, and now you're probably making, I looked the other day, Sean Aguano, for those ASU fans, he's making like $600K a year as a running backs coach. So I would imagine the University of Miami running backs coach is probably right around the same, half to $750,000. So like, it's a dude that grinded his way up. Like, he's been around some dynamic runners. And this year getting, 1,192 yards and 12 touchdowns out of Mark Fletcher. They averaged 152 yards per game on the ground. Miami did. Just, you can tell that he's a well-respected guy just by the path he has taken to get where he's at. Now, Jess and I can be fully 100% transparent. That don't mean anything, right? Like,
no, it doesn't.
Like,
and we don't know who's going to be the running backs on the roster anyway. So
right. So the reality is, he can be a great coach. He could be a terrible coach. Like, it'll come out in the wash. If he makes it through his 2-year contract, he's a good enough coach. If he gets the axe after 1 year, he's a terrible coach, and if they bring him back after his 2 years, then they really like him and they like what he's doing. And that's kind of how you have to look at position coaches, right? But I will say this. I don't remember off the top of my head a guy that's, and I know he did a little special teams coordinators at that D2 level. I don't remember a guy that just straight up coached running backs for 15 straight years. Like typically there's like a lot of like offensive quality control. There's a lot of, so like this is a dude that like worked through the system to just be a running back coach. And so that might mean he's a guy that you can trust, and he's a guy that wants to be, a running backs coach only. I mean, not expanding your horizons, not taking OC jobs at the lower levels after you've had some success. Like that's a guy that had a one kind of track mind over the last decade and a half, and he's achieved his goal.
Yeah. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up this edition of the Rise Up Zero podcast, Best Ever Cardinals Talk on the Web. We'll have more coaching staff news next week, but our next show later this week will be the Super Bowl picks, props, and predictions. So with that, that's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening. As always, we'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise up, See Red.